Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of season 2 of the Big Ten Watchdog News podcast. This is episode 15 overall, if you include last year's episodes. I am one of your hosts. I'm Graham Dinas.
And I'm Taylor Seamer.
If you guys are new here, I'm excited to get into year 2 of this podcast. But before we get into it, I just want to let you guys know to subscribe if you're watching on YouTube and to leave a like. We have links in our description to our Spotify and Apple podcast platforms. So if you want a more convenient way to listen to our podcast, those are available in the link tree in the description below. Also, make sure for sure to definitely follow us on Twitter at B1G Watchdog News.
That would be X now, by the way.
Excellent.
No, that would be X, not Twitter.
Oh,
Formerly known as Twitter.
follow us where we tweet on X. Uh, a lot of updates coming on Twitter or X. That's where we're most active. So make sure to follow us there, and also give us a follow on TikTok. Same handle at B1G Watchdog News. To keep us, if you want to see some of the clips from these podcasts, and some editorial type stuff, game reviews, that kind of stuff is what will be going up on TikTok. I'm a little rusty at this intro. I'm sure I'll get back into the hang of it as the season starts, but it's almost here. We're about 2 weeks out from the start of the season. I'm excited.
Yeah, I know your guys' game you have that exhibition game coming up a little closer than ours. Our first game is until November, but
Our first game is
still excited.
tonight. We're recording
Oh,
this on October 20th on Friday. I think we're going to post it tonight as well. I could be wrong. I think that might be the plan. But they play tonight at home, and then we have our exhibition against Kansas on next Sunday, the 29th. So a couple of those. You don't have any exhibitions until November?
our first exhibition is like first week of November, yeah.
Huh. Do you have two, or is it just the one?
Just the one as far as I'm aware.
Did you get a secret scrimmage?
We do have a scrimmage. It's next Friday, I think.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. So yeah, we're obviously, again, if you're new here, I go to the University of Illinois. Taylor is a lifelong fan of the Michigan Wolverines. So that's kind of the
Also attends
dynamic.
the university.
He does, yeah. So that's kind of the dynamic that we've got going here. Little rivalry, I would say, in basketball more so than anything else. There's a little bit of attention between the two
Well,
schools.
that's because your football program is in the basement.
It's basketball season now. Jim Harbaugh is a cheater and a fraud. He watches other teams' games. It's
No evidence.
illegal.
There is zero evidence of any wrongdoing.
You can't watch other teams' games. That's illegal under the NCAA code.
As in
So
scout.
it's illegal. Jim Harbaugh's a cheater. What we're gonna do in this episode, it's the part one of our Big Ten preview. We've got half the teams across the Big Ten that we're gonna break down kind of some of the moves. I know that we left you guys kind of on a cliffhanger with our transfer portal coverage, so we're gonna finish that out. Just kind of talk about who's coming back, who left, and who's coming in from other places this year, and just kind of give our predictions, answer a couple questions about half the teams, and then we will have a part two as well where we will do the same with the other 7 teams. But let's just go ahead and get right into it. Let's start with Illinois. I'm excited for this Illinois team first and foremost. Last year was kind of I don't want to say down year because it's a lot better than where the Illinois program has been in the past. But in the Underwood era, probably the worst year thus far. But I'm really excited. I think the expectations are fairly high for this team, and I think that this team is more than capable of exceeding those expectations.
I mean, I just find it hard to get excited about losing the first weekend again this year, but I
This
suppose there's always room for improvement. Haven't seen
this
it yet from Underwood, but
I think again the same questions are going to exist about the half court offense, and my biggest question obviously is going to be, the point guard position. Lost your 2 key guards from last year, and really didn't bring a ton of point guard depth in the portal, or I guess we do have an incoming freshman. Um, but I think that what this team can do defensively is going to be at a higher level than any of the other Illinois teams that we've seen recently. And hopefully this team can shoot the ball a little bit. Um, but yeah, I'm excited. I think this team in the transition game can be elite, which doesn't help a ton in the Big Ten, as we've noted. I think this team has enough depth to where they can get out and after you on the defensive end and they could apply some pressure. Another thing that doesn't bode well in the Big Ten. But yeah, a lot of athletes, and it's exciting. We're returning. Terrence Shannon and Coleman Hawkins are the two big stories. There was some questionability as if those guys were going to go professional at the end of last year. They both decide to return. And so that's massive whenever you can get two, all Big Ten caliber players to return for another year that have NBA potential. That's obviously going to help Illinois out this season.
Yeah, so while we're on the topic of cheating coaches, I want to know how much Underwood paid these two guys to come back
That's not
under the
cheating
table.
anymore.
Under the table. All right, if that's not cheating, then hang the Fab Five banners. It's not cheating.
It was cheating then. It's different.
All right. Anyways, I would have thought that both of these guys, I personally thought both of them were gone, but somehow they both ended up back. And I think that's like, if both of these guys weren't back, Illinois would be in a very tough situation for this year.
They would have
But
been.
with
I
them
think
coming back, I think they're, not going to be struggling even remotely in the Big Ten, especially with some of the worst teams. I think they're going to be top half.
yeah, a lot of the problems last year had to do with continuity. Coleman Hawkins was really the only guy, I guess Luke Goody, but he was dealing with injuries, that was a returner from the team the previous season that won a share of the Big Ten regular season. This year, you've got those two guys coming back on top of Dane Danger, who averaged at least near double figures last year. Sincere Harris and Ty Rogers, who are both very good as freshmen in their key roles last year, and they're going to be expected to take a leap. And then Luke Goody's back for year 3. The only one left from that recruiting class that came in my freshman year. So there's shooters there. You've got that continuity, and there's a lot more continuity on this team than there are on really a lot of the teams. A lot of the teams we're going to talk about today, you're going to see a lot of carryover, but I feel like Illinois is in a better spot this year than last year due to the carryover of those 6 guys, because they're all going to be key rotational pieces.
Yeah, and maybe if you could just not have cancers in the locker room with guys quitting mid-season, that might help you guys out as well.
Maybe. I mean, that probably will help. Speaking of some key people that left last year, obviously Matt Meyer is a guy that he played his last year of college, and so he's gone. Jay Epps and Sky Clark, the two guards. Sky Clark is the guy you're mentioning. I don't know about cancer in the locker room, but I do know he did leave midseason. Jaden Epps transferring out to Georgetown, and then RJ Melendez transferring out to Georgia. So those are the key losses for this Illinois team. And Epps, I think, is the big one. Did you see some of the tweets from a couple days ago about their secret scrimmage?
Yeah, I don't know how true those reports were because they seem kind of outlandish, but if he is putting up those numbers for Georgetown, maybe Georgetown is no longer in the basement of college basketball.
Yeah, 46 points in a secret scrimmage. I buy that he put up 46 points. I don't know how often that number is getting put up in regular season play. But you kind of saw the same thing last year too with Brandon Podchemski, who transferred out to Santa Clara, and he averaged like 22, 23 points out there, and now he's playing for the Warriors. So guys tend to leave Illinois, go get a bigger role, and then just like score outside of the Big Ten.
What does that say about the program or the Big Ten as a whole?
The Big Ten's too slow. It just is.
Yeah, I'll buy that. The Big Ten plays very slow compared to other power conferences.
And these guys were always going to take leaps. It's just they're expediting the process by transferring out and assuming like a lead role in the offense, because I'm sure like Jay Epps would have been I don't know, like a 2,000 point scorer for Illinois if he would have stayed, the course. But he might do more than that at another school like Georgetown, where he's going to be the focal point of the offense. So that's interesting. So they're losing that, and that was kind of your supposed lead guard of the future. And what you notice with the incoming players for Illinois is they didn't pick up another lead guard. You've got, obviously, I'm really excited about Marcus Damask coming in from SIU Carbondale. Definitely
I
this
just
team, they need shooting. He he had to facilitate the Southern offense for the last 4 years. I think if he settles more into a third option shooter, as well as like a post up mid range role, I think he can average 12 points a game in this offense and fill a role very well.
I'm not sure that everything will translate from SIU to the Big Ten. They're completely different conferences, different skill levels. The guy's guard, I mean, he's a great shooter. He'll help you guys out there. But the defensive level between that and, say if you put like a Kobe Buffkin type player onto him, I don't know if he's going to score as much as he did at SIU. Additionally, I think he's a defensive liability, but that'll be seen, I guess, early enough in the season where they can probably work on it. I'm sure they were working on it all summer because they know he's a slow white guy.
We were talking about this right before we started filming. He's individually athletically, he's not a great defender, but he's a smart defender. And whenever you've got the level of athletes that we have surrounding him, I think that you can minimize the loss you take on defense and hopefully for a maximizing of his offensive output, which again, he's had to man the offense at Carbondale and the Valley's a strong defensive league for a mid-major, especially. It's a good defensive league. Bradley and Bradley is good defensively.
Northern Iowa.
Yeah, at times they've been down recently.
Drake's
good. Quincy Guerrier, another key incomer from Oregon. Great on the boards, great shooter. Plays that kind of wing 4. He'll probably be a 4 in this offense. And so he's another guy that's excited. I'm excited to see. Yeah, those two guys are going to make large impacts. Justin Harmon from Utah Valley is going to add an impact in the backcourt. He averaged about 15 points a game last year at Utah Valley. And so he'll be a nice spark off the bench as far as offense goes. And then we added Amani Hansberry as a freshman in the front court, and Dre Gibbs Lawhorn will also give us depth in the front court. Taylor, before we wrap up Illinois, what is the one thing that you are the most excited or curious about for this team for the upcoming year?
I'm most curious about how their guard play is going to work out because I feel like they don't have a strong point guard, which you kind of touched on earlier.
Yeah, that's kind of my biggest question mark as well. Like I mentioned, yeah, but you've got Coleman Hawkins facilitates the offense. Marcus Damask can facilitate an offense. It sounds like Ty Rodgers is going to be the starting point guard. And so he's going to be kind of a point forward. Again, he's a great rebounder, great hustle guy. I love Ty Rodgers, probably my favorite player on this roster. But I'm excited to see if he can take a leap at the point guard spot. Projected to finish 4th in the conference by the coaches. Came in preseason AP poll number 25. What's your predictions? What's your floor and ceiling for this Illinois team?
I would say within the Big Ten, they can finish anywhere from 1st to 8th. I think they'll be at the top, for 1st to 7th, I guess, top half. I think that the 4th spot, 4 or 5 is, I probably would have put them at 5, but 4 I'm fine with. Outside of the Big Ten, 25 I get because it's Illinois. They have the hype around preseason polls. I put 0 weight on preseason polls personally.
That's fair.
So I'm fine with the 25 to start the season. Again, I think that they're a first weekend team just because they have some weaknesses at the guard play. And the most important thing you need in the tournament is good guard play.
That's true. That's a trend that we've seen often over the past several years is guard play being key in March. I think this team probably sitting around a 4 or 5 seed in the tournament. I don't know if they're not in the same tier as the top 2 teams in the conference, which we'll get into here in a second. But I would put them ahead of the rest of the league. I'd put them at 3rd personally in my rankings. Maybe some slight bias, but I like the guys that they have returning. I like the additions. There may be some addition by subtraction. Yeah, and then I could see maybe the floor being, like you said, like a 6th or 7th in the Big Ten, and then probably around the same as far as seed line goes, like a 7. That would be my floor for this team. But I think this is a team that could make a second weekend. I trust this
Oh, that's
team.
bold.
I
Oh,
trust
that's
this team
bold.
to make a second weekend more than I've trusted the previous 2 teams.
You couldn't make a second weekend with
Io and Kofi.
Io and
Hey,
Kofi
that
because you lost
Loyola
to some
team
big white guy from Loyola.
was a bit of a buzz saw. But yeah,
We
I
seem to
think,
have no problem with them.
huh?
Michigan seemed to have no problem with them.
That was a lot. That was before. That was a different era of Loyola basketball. That's another good team in the Valley defensively. They're out now. They're in the A10. So yeah, I'm excited about Illinois. Let's move on to Michigan. Projected to finish 11th in the Big Ten, which I feel is low. Returning Doug McDaniel, Terrence Williams, and Terrace Reed are all projected starters. And then you add into the fold Namari Burnett from Alabama, who is going to be a key defensive wing, and Olivier Kamwa, who put on a show in the tournament from Tennessee. I'm really excited to watch him. I'll just let you get into Michigan. I'll let you cook.
Yeah, so obviously, I feel like we lost a good portion of the team that was, high contributors from last year, being mostly Kobe and at times Joey and Jet. A notable absence
No,
from
we're
that
not going to
list.
breeze over
A
the
notable
loss of Hunter
absence
Dickinson.
from that is the fact that I said Hunter Dickinson did not have a large impact on the team last year. And I think that is still accurate looking back on it because it seemed as though he was always out to get his own and not to play as the team, which I think hurt in some situations. So I'm not mad that he's gone. I had maybe even could say that I was glad that he left, open up, get some change in there, see what we can work with, something new. Also, going to Terrace Reed, who I feel like could be a little more dynamic. Terrace Reed's a little quicker with his feet, maybe less good at ball handling in general, but that's something you can teach. You can't really teach as much quickness off the dribble. And I've seen some, one dribble spin moves from Terrace Reed that Hunter could show on occasion, but not regularly. So I'd like to see Harris expand on that this year. Those being the people that left, I think that does hurt us, but Doug played amazing, especially in the last 10 games last year, really came into that role. Something he wasn't expecting either, really, and kind of got thrown into it as a young player on the team. And as for Terrence Williams, I think it is known that on this podcast, I am not a Terrence Williams fan.
Uh-huh.
However, about 5 days ago on the Michigan basketball Twitter, it's a video of Terrence Williams shooting threes, and the caption is 56 of 69. So
Wow.
if you just do a little math on that, I don't know who all was shooting these, if it was just him or the team or whatever, but it was a video of him and going 82% from the field. So if he can do that, even half of that, if he can shoot 40% from the field regularly, this team will be unstoppable because how do you stop a guy who makes 40%? It's impossible.
But I kind of agree with what you were saying about Hunter and even Jet Howard at times. I think Kobe Buffkin might be the biggest loss. This team is obviously going to be less talented than the team from last year. I think that's obvious. But I could see them being a team that has about the same results. Like I don't see them the additions and the subtractions, while there's a talent deficit, I could see there being no change in overall product. I think this team will be more fun to, maybe not more fun to watch is the right word. They'll be scrappier for sure. This team defensively is scary. I'll straight up say that.
Yeah, I think so as well. I mean, I'll remind people that last year Michigan had won their last game that they played against, I think, Indiana in that season. They would have finished second in the Big Ten standings.
Yeah. And
The
again,
Big Ten was
it's a
very
one
bad
game
last year.
difference. Yeah.
The Big Ten was very bad last year, but everybody from 2 to 10 was within one game of each other. So I think that and I don't see that really changing again this year. So if Michigan had some games where they lost by, I mean, their margin of loss last year was, I think, like 3 points on average. It was less. It was like one possession. If you even get half of those, they won the Big Ten. So if you get half of those to fall, you finish in the top 6 or 5 or 6, I think, and that's not bad for this team whatsoever.
I'm excited
That might
to
even
see.
be them outperforming
Yeah.
how good they are if they just because of how bad the Big Ten is, they could finish in 5th or 6th, and I wouldn't be surprised.
What I'm most excited to see for this team is how they replace Hunter and Jet on the offensive end, because Kamwa is going to have to step into that lead role as far as offense goes, I think. Burnett and Terrence are probably not, they're not your key scorers, so it's kind of going to be a three-headed monster with McDaniel, Kamwa, and Terrace Reed. I'm excited to see if, I don't know if that's going to be enough to win you games in this conference with just those three on the offensive end, and you're probably only getting 2 a night. But I think this team defensively is going to put on display. I'm excited to see what Juwan does with this team, as much as I despise Juwan Howard with every ounce of my being. I'm excited to see what this group can do in the season. I think that they're a tournament team.
I have no problem winning every game 60-50. Just win the game.
No,
You don't have to score 100 points every game. If you go out and only get 50 points, you should win every game you play in college basketball. So
Taylor,
I have no problem with defensive juggernauts.
Yeah. What are you most excited for this Michigan team?
The new guys coming in, the transfers especially, just to see what those guys can bring to the team, because we lost, obviously, the headliner names on the team. So that kind of leaves a void for the new guys if they want to step into it.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm excited to see Kamwa in the Big Ten, because he's athletic. He's gonna pose some problems. And so I'm excited to see what he does at this level. I am a little concerned about backcourt depth, I'm gonna say. What's the status on Jalen Llewellyn? Do you know anything that I don't?
From everything that I've read, they plan on him playing.
Okay. Do you expect that he'll come off the bench?
He's healthy. I think to start the season he will, at least, just because Doug played so well last year.
Yeah.
But yeah, from everything that I've heard is that he is healthy, or will be by the time the season starts, and he'll be ready to go.
Okay.
So that's great help on the backcourt spot.
All right. What's your biggest fear or question mark, I guess, with this group?
Kind of along the same way, is that there's no headliner. So who do you turn to when you need a basket with 3 minutes to go in a tie game, or you're down 2, or you're up 2? Who's that guy? Because there is no headliner. So that makes it both exciting and worrying.
Yeah, I get that. There's just kind of I felt that way about teams in the past. It's kind of like, who's the guy that's gonna be able to take that shot? Hopefully someone can grow into it for you guys. If not, that is a very worrying thing to think about in close games for sure. My prediction for this team, again, they're projected 11th, voted by the coaches. I think they're probably 8 or 9 again, like they were last year. That being said, I expect more out of the non-conference. And I know they were a bubble team last year and they're on the wrong side of the bubble. I think if I had to pick, I'd put them on the right side of the bubble, probably as like an 11 seed. That's my prediction for them right now.
I think 11 is a disrespect to the institution that is the University of Michigan. I would say like 6 to 8 range, squarely in the middle is doable because there's a lot of bad teams in the Big Ten. So that's kind of where I put them in conference. Out of conference, I'd see them as a like 11, 10, 11, 12 seed, somewhere
Yeah.
around there. Like you said, on the bubble, but I don't think they'll have to be worried come tournament time. I think they'll know they're in, and they'll just be on the edge of the ends.
Okay. I think that's reasonable. Yeah, let's move on to the preseason Big Ten favorite. Let's get into the big hitters. There are two big hitters this year. Let's start with Purdue. Obviously, coming off one of the two worst losses in the history of college basketball. I would argue
Arguably,
that
theirs could have been worse.
I would argue theirs is the worst. You can make the argument for Virginia, but I mentioned this a ton last year, but Fairleigh Dickinson did not win the regular season or conference tournament in what was the worst conference in college basketball last year. And then they
And
went
promptly
and
put
beat
a
Purdue
smacking on the Boilermakers.
on the best team in the deepest conference in the country that did win the tournament and the regular season. So that goes to show you what March Madness is all about. It's truly madness.
And that's why it's the best tournament in the land.
It is, absolutely. This team is essentially the same as last year, which is a scary thought to think because they were a 1 seed last year. Returning Edey, of course, the National Player of the Year. We got to start there. I think it's gonna be hard for him to repeat. I remember Oscar Tshiebwe had trouble last year repeating his performance as National Player of the Year when he came back. But he's certainly the favorite to win Big Ten Player of the Year at the minimum.
Yeah, I think that's a given. Have they come out with the preseason All Americans, All Big Ten?
They're coming out with them as they speak. Obviously, Zach Edey's going to be on both of those teams
I was
first
going to
team.
say he's got to be first team, probably pretty close to unanimously.
Yeah, I'd imagine he is coming back as the National Player of the Year. But we'll see because there were times at the end of last season where Purdue failed to adapt, and we'll see because they've had the two freshman guards last year in Fletcher Lawyer and Braden Smith. Those guys are both back. They're sophomores now with a little more experience. All those wing guys that are essentially interchangeable, Gillis first, Morton. They lost Brandon Newman and Dave Jenkins, but they bring in another dog, Southern stand-up, Lance Jones. I'm not sure if he's going to be a starter for them or not. And then Miles Colvin's an incoming freshman that's got some bounce. And then Trey Kaufman-Wren is the Edey replacement. He's the backup. I'd expect him to get a little more run than he did last year as well. This team was the best team in the country for over half of last season, and they're bringing essentially everyone back. So the fact that they come in as number 3 is kind of startling to me. I think they should be preseason number 1.
I would say they're number 1. I think people might have hesitations because of how they played out in March last year.
Recency bias.
Just because the conference and then the conference always struggles in March because they play a different brand of basketball than everybody else in the entire country. So when they go to March, things happen. But I don't think the 3 is bad for them, and I think they'll be just fine.
Yeah, I mean that's about where they ended last year, I would say, as probably the number 3 or number 4 team, right? But
Well,
yeah,
you could argue that they were the 64th best team, but
yeah, I mean they'd be in a big tie for 33rd if you go by finish. Yeah, this team's going to be really good. I don't want to come out now and say they're going to dominate Big Ten play again. But don't color me surprised if that ends up being the case starting in mid-January.
I would say pretty much the same. They didn't lose anybody, and they won the Big Ten last year by what, 3 or 4 games?
It was 3. They ended up going 15-5 in conference, and no one else went better than 12-8.
Yeah, so and I really don't see them losing 5 games again this year. I think they might be better than that, just because everybody has experience. Like last year, if you pressured their freshman guards, you could beat them. That's how all the teams that beat them did it. They forced their guards into turnovers, so they couldn't get down and just throw it to Edey. Or they get Edey in foul trouble by only throwing it to their big guy every play, so he has to come out and then they can do whatever they want with a regular sized offense. And I don't think that I don't think they'll have. They could still have the Zach Edey problem because it's not really something you can fix, but you can get more. I mean, all the guards have more experience, and Painter's a great coach. I'm sure he's got them ready to go for. He saw those same weaknesses that everybody else saw, and he had a whole offseason to correct them. So I think they'll be just as good, if not better, than last year.
Yeah. What are you most excited for this Purdue team?
Kind of along those similar lines, I'm excited to see how the guards adapt.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also excited to see what the SIU old connection for Painter works out with here with Lance Jones.
I'm excited for Lance as well. That's what I was going to say. Last year, I felt like they never had a true threat off the bounce. Lawyer's a great shooter, and Braden Smith was a facilitator more so, and the rest of those guys were just kind of spot up guys around Zach Edey. Lance Jones is quick enough to go off the bounce, and also he's great defensively, is what people don't bring up about Lance Jones. He chucked up a lot of shots at SIUC, and whenever he's hot, he's great. But on a team like Purdue, you don't have to worry about him chucking, because if he's cold, he has no pressure on him. He's, you're playing with house money with him offensively. Defensively, he's going to provide them with a big spark. I'd also say I'm curious to see if they adapt some with their second unit with Trey Kaufman and Wren at the 5, because Edey was playing 30 minutes or so last year a game. I remember 2 years ago on the Jaden Ivey team, they had him and Trevion Williams essentially both playing 20 minutes each. I'm not sure if Trey Kaufman Wren is going to be worthy of playing 20 minutes over the reigning National Player of the Year or anything, but I wonder if you can spot Edey, 10 extra minutes and have a little bit more athleticism defensively and just play a different game offensively where they can't zone in on your key threat under the rim. What's your projection for this team?
I think just by purely numbers, they can win the Big Ten again.
Yeah.
In the tournament. Their floor, I think, is probably, if they don't finish first, they're finishing second.
Mm-hmm.
Unless there's a major, injury or something that happens that causes them to get all out of jumble. I think with the team they have now, first or second is the only place they can stop in the Big Ten. Outside the conference, I think I wouldn't have said that they could have lost first round last year, so I guess they could do that. But I think Elite Eight is more close to what their actual ceiling will be. I don't know that Painter gets to hang another Final Four banner like they haven't since 1912 or something before the First World War, whatever it was. But
yeah, I think this team's winning the Big Ten. They're my pick. They obviously, the coaches picked them to win the Big Ten as well. I think this is my preseason championship pick, which is very bold going for a Big Ten team. But you saw it with Virginia 5 years ago. They go out and get bounced in game 1 as a number 1 seed. The next year, they bring the whole crew back and they make a title run. I see a lot of similarities between those teams. I could see them winning it all. I could see them being maybe a 2 seed at the lowest. I think they're a 1 or a 2. But as long as Edey's healthy, I think this team is my pick to win the national title.
I can't see that. Virginia plays such a different style of offense where it's just shoot the 3 as many times as you can and see if we can get hot for, what do you have to win, 6 games to get to cut the nets. Purdue does not play that way. I don't see the same thing happening.
They've got shooters though. Like they can play that way if they really wanted to. All these guys can shoot except for Edey. They've got 9 guys.
You don't know what he's been working on this offseason.
That's true. I haven't.
If he pulls out with an 80% 3-point shooter like Terrence Williams is, then you better watch out.
Yeah, that would probably be that's better than Wembanyama by like a landslide. Right? He's more polished. He's a better shooter, but he's not as athletic. I don't know. That's a scary thought to even consider. Let's move on to Michigan State. Last year's de facto tournament team from the conference. They made it all the way to the Sweet 16, the furthest of any Big Ten team And that leads them to the being projected to finish second in the conference and number 4 in the AP poll, essentially because outside of Joey Hauser, again, bringing everyone back. Continuity is key in the Big Ten, especially. And this team's bringing back 4 starters as well as their probably one. I think he may have won 6 Man of the Year last year. I could be wrong. And Malik Hall, as well as bringing. They have a great freshman class as well. This team, I think this team has the highest ceiling maybe in the conference.
I think this team is the conference's best chance to make a Final Four for the year. Just because they have guys who have all played together for 1, 2, 3 years even. So these, especially in the Big Ten, if you can keep the same guys year after year, that's why like old school John Beilein teams could be good because he'd bring in 3 stars that would stay for all 4 years. And you could just put people in the grind fest because you were so comfortable with all the guys you were playing. And I see that same thing happening with this team. I think they're pretty good. They would be the contender to bump Purdue off the top spot.
Yeah, I think these 2 teams are 1A and 1B in the conference. And then there's pretty wide gap between them and everyone else. Probably the best backcourt in the country. Tyson Walker, AJ Hogarth, Jaden Akins. You could make an argument they were the best backcourt last year. They weren't. They were
I'd say it's a fair statement. Yeah,
they're the best backcourt in the Big Ten last year, and they're all coming back. Malik Hall, he was kind of my pick to be like the breakout star of that team last year, and he was dealing with some injuries. But now he'll be an everyday starter without Joey Hauser, and then Mady Sissoko coming back to round out the 5-man starting lineup at the 5. Jackson Kohler and Carson Cooper both coming back. I get them confused. I think they're the same player. But again, more continuity. Trey Holloman kind of looks like Cassius Winston as their backup guard. And then they're bringing in the freshman. Jeremy Fears, I know is going to be good. Cohen Carr, I believe I saw a video where he dunked from the free throw line and like maybe not a scrimmage.
Yes.
He's a freak athlete.
Wow, that was crazy. He like double clutch hammer dunked it too. It's not just like he reached out and did it. He jumped on the free throw line and threw it down.
Yeah, he's scary. I don't know what type of minutes he's going to be getting as a freshman, but he certainly brings another aspect to this team that I don't know if there's another athlete like that in the Big Ten.
I wouldn't say so.
No, I'm ecstatic.
Not at the freshman level, at least.
I think I could see this team. I think their floor is significantly lower than Purdue's. I could see this team maybe not stumbling is the right word, but not living up to, number 4 team in the country expectations. But I think they also could be the best team. There's more variance among what I think they'll do than Purdue. What are you most excited for Michigan State this year to see? We're curious about.
I think just everything about them. I don't know that they have really a weakness. They've got guards, they've got bigs, they've got Izzo, and they've got them all coming back. I'm just excited to watch them.
I need to know where the shooting is going to come from with this group because Joey Hauser was their shooter last year, and he's gone. They didn't go out to the portal and get anyone. Tyson Walker is more of a volume guy. He doesn't shoot. He has the ball in his hands a lot, and he's not shooting very efficiently. Jaden Akins is a good shooter. That's the one thing that I'm kind of hesitant about. But again, I'm very excited to see what this team does. And I kind of gave you my ceiling floor. What are your predictions?
I feel like in the conference, they could get about halfway through the conference schedule. It's like the first or second week of February at this point. And they just have a week where they collapse and lose 3 games within maybe not all 3 games in 1 week, but if you say like they lose 3 out of 6 over 2 weeks or something, that just like deflates their chances to win the conference. And I don't know, that could be from anything. One guy gets hurt minorly for a week, or they just, like you said, they don't have much shooting, so they go cold for a week. Something could happen in that sense, and that could knock them out of first or even second place. But I think a top 3 finish is pretty I put the lowest they possibly could finish as a 4, but I expect them to finish top 3 and make a deep run in the tournament as long as they don't get ice cold.
Yeah, I think again, highest ceiling for sure, and the floor is lower than Purdue. Um, I don't think they'll win the conference, but it's them or Purdue, I think, can win it. I could see this team realistically finishing as maybe like at the lowest, maybe like fifth or sixth in the Big Ten. And that would be like worst case scenario. Um, just because I mean they are returning everyone, but they're returning everyone from a team that was the fourth or fifth best team in the Big Ten last year. And so I don't expect all these other teams to take a huge leap, but that's a possibility. Um, in the tournament, I could see them coming in at the lowest, like I said, at a 6. I could see them being a 2 seed as well. And then yeah, I definitely think that they're outside of Purdue, who I think can win the title. I think that they have the highest likelihood, you're right, to make a Final Four and to make a tournament run because that guard play can carry you in March and they have the best maybe in the country. All right, 3 teams left in this part 1. Let's start with Wisconsin. Let's do the Badgers. Projected to finish 5th in the Big Ten by the coaches. They were the first team out of the AP Top 25, whereas Illinois was the last team in. And another team that's just returning everyone. They lost Jordan Davis to Illinois State, but outside of that, their whole starting 5 is back, which is exciting to think about. And last year, Tyler Wall, he was supposed to be the guy. He was dealing with injuries. And so if he returns back to a high level of play, this team can fill the expectations that they had last year in mid-January whenever they were, I don't know, I think they were ranked like 18th in the country. And this team could be that team. I guess let's just get right into it with what are you most excited to see for this team?
I'm most excited to see some old-fashioned white boy basketball as Wisconsin always plays. It's so fascinating to see that in contrast with any other game that you watch. These, especially if Wisconsin's playing Iowa or something, that high-powered, go at it offense is like no other.
That's what, in the same way that offense will be, I mean, maybe not enjoyable, but very sound. It scares me on the other end defensively because last year their biggest problem was they didn't have the athletes on the other end. And Chucky Hepburn's a good defender at the point, and I was big on him taking a leap last year, and he really didn't. Maybe this is the year where Chucky Hepburn takes the leap. But yeah, I mean, on the wings, Connor Sejan's not going to give you much defensively. While I do think he could be a stud on the offensive end. Steven Crowell's not an elite rim protector, but he is good on the boards. Yeah, I mean, this team was a team that did not make the tournament last year. I believe they went to the Final Four in the NIT. I might be wrong.
It was Elite Final Four. They went to the Final Four, I think.
Okay.
And lost to St. John's. They lost to some smaller school.
I want to say they lost to North Texas.
Was that it? It was some funky school that like you've heard of, but was kind of out there in the realm of basketball.
I think
at this point
they should be better than they were last year. Last year they were on the bubble, but were they really on the bubble? This year I think they'll be
North Texas in overtime.
Oh, overtime. This year I think they'll be around the 7 to 10 seed range. It's kind of my prediction. High floor for this group though. I don't think that they're gonna miss the tournament again with the same crew. But yeah, I don't think they have a very high ceiling. I could see this team's probably they're projected 5th. I think that's about the highest I'd give them, somewhere between that 5th to 8 range, depending on how the Big Ten shakes out. That's kind of what I see for this team.
I would tend to agree. I think putting them at 5th is high, but I think that's only because nobody really knew where to put anybody in the middle of the conference, and so somebody had to be in the 5th spot. They had a collapse late in the season last year. So the thing that I'm most interested in is how can they assure that's not going to happen again, or hope that it happens earlier in the season so they can recover by the end, because I think that was kind of another part of the reason they didn't get in was just the eye test.
Yeah.
Of which people thought they played well in the beginning and now they're down. Do they really deserve it now? You got to have a different perspective going into the tournament. You need people to think that they're on the up now and that they deserve it.
Yeah. I wonder if Greg Gard is on the hot seat if this season doesn't go well. He's had a lot of success. He's won 2 Big Ten conference regular season titles. And whatever it's been 7 years since Bo Ryan retired. But yeah, if he runs it back with the same group and they finish in the same spot without making a tournament, I wonder if his name starts getting thrown around in the are they going to fire him category. Something to look out for.
I would say he's probably not, just because he has relatively consistent success. And if he's returning everybody, I think he'll have better they won't have those same kind of little flaws that lost in a couple games. I don't know that he'd be on the hot seat, but maybe he could have some questions to answer to put him in that category.
I'm excited to see AJ Storr from St. John's, another one of the guys that Rick Pitino kicked out whenever he got into that program. But AJ Storr, he should provide them with a little more athleticism that they were kind of missing last year. And he might be a guy that starts for this team. I don't know. I know Max Klesmet played well defensively, but I think those two guys, AJ Storr could be kind of the key for this team. I think they need an athlete. They went out and got one. So I'm excited to see the role that he plays for this team. All right, second to last team, Maryland, voted by the coaches to finish 3rd in the conference. They returned Jameer Young, who was first team All Big Ten last year. They returned Julian Reese and Dante Scott as well from that starting 5. The Iron 5. They never subbed last year. But they're losing Hakeem Hart, who transferred out to Villanova, and they're losing Ian Martinez to Utah State. So they're bringing in some freshmen to fill that role. Deshaun Harris-Smith has been getting some buzz for potential Big Ten Freshman of the Year, just because he's going to be thrust into the big role as the starting 2 guard for that team, and then Jamie Kaiser, another freshman coming in. What are you excited for this Maryland team?
I'm excited to see what carries over from last year, because they had, I thought, better success in the Big Ten than they were kind of expected to, or that I at least thought they were expected to, but then they kind of fell off as the year went on, or as the year got closer to the end. They kind of regressed back into what kind of I was expecting. And I'm also excited to see how these new guys come in, because if you're starting 2 freshmen or even 1 freshman and having another one play big minutes off the bench, that is difficult to do, especially in a conference like the Big Ten. So I'm interested to see how that dynamic works out.
Yeah, I think there might be a few more growing pains in year 2 for Kevin Willard, because he kind of just jumped right in last year with a veteran group, and you're right, they kind of sped off at the start and then slowed down. They kind of sputtered towards the end. But yeah, this team will be younger. They'll be more athletic. One thing that I'm excited to see, Jordan Geronimo from Indiana, a little in the family transfer to Maryland. Julian Reese last year was great defensively, but he was always getting in foul trouble. So I'm curious to see if that problem's been resolved. And if not, then how well does Jordan Geronimo step into that role of the 5 of that group?
Yeah, I think Geronimo got kind of slighted at Indiana. I know he was hurt for a while there, but I feel like all the focus was on Jackson Davis, and he got no kind of support for how good of a guy he was. So I'm interested to see how his abilities from Indiana carry over to Maryland and what kind of impact he has.
Yeah, he was probably in line to be one of the guys. And then they bring in Khalil Ware, which we'll get into. We're talking about Indiana next to wrap the episode up. But he was kind of the odd man out of that front court this year, which he expected to take a leap whenever TJD left for the draft. And so maybe he'll get a bigger role. He's still not going to be starting at Maryland, I wouldn't think. And so we'll see. He should play some minutes at least, because I'd imagine Julian Reese isn't going to stay out of foul trouble immediately. but maybe that's something that he's worked on, going straight up, because he was a guy that commits a lot of fouls. What's your expectation for Maryland this year?
I don't like the third place finish for them here in the coaches poll, at least. I think it's high for them, just given the fact that they have so many questions and they sputtered at the end later in the conference season. They couldn't keep that same energy up. I'm thinking maybe a bigger change for their ranking than you might imagine. I'm thinking they're in the bottom half of the conference.
Interesting.
I just don't see it from them. I don't know.
Jameer Young coming back is massive. Jameer Young is going to be first 10 All Big Ten, first team All Big Ten again. And that's huge because there were question marks as to whether he would decide to stay or go. So that's going to be massive. I just don't see how a team with a guard like that finishes. I mean, at worst, maybe like 8th or 9th in the conference, but I could see them. I think 3rd is definitely the ceiling, but I could see that being in the realm of possibility. And then when it comes to the tournament, probably like a 5th or a 6th seed is about what I would expect. Last year they were an 8 seed, and that's certainly in the range of possibilities as well. All right, let's finish it out. Indiana lost everyone from last year. TJD, Jalen Hood-Schifino, both first-round picks. Miller Kopp and Race Thompson are gone. They're 2 best role players. They both graduated and ran out of eligibility. Tamar Bates is out to Missouri. He kind of stepped in to not a lead guard role, but he was an important guard for that team. And then Jordan Geronimo, as we just mentioned, transferring out to Maryland. But Malik Reneau is supposed to be the guy that's stepping in for TJD at the 4 spot. He showed flashes last year as a freshman. And they're also returning Trey Galloway and Xavier Johnson in the backcourt. Xavier Johnson, he was supposed to be the Robin, I guess, to TJD's Batman. He dealt with injuries, and Hood-Schifino really stepped into that role. But Xavier Johnson should assume lead dog role this year, I think.
Yeah, I think Xavier Johnson and Trey Galloway coming back are great, but they kind of lost what I think at one time was their entire lineup, or starting lineup, maybe. TJD, Schifino, Kopp, Thompson, and Geronimo was kind of like their go-to rotation of guys, and all 5 of them are gone. So they need their guys to step up big time for this year.
I've got faith in Mike Woodson. I think out of all the Big Ten coaches, I feel like he's a guy that I would trust with that much turnover to have another successful season back to back. And I think Indiana's probably been the most active team in the portal, or maybe they just got the best get in the portal in Khalil Ware from Oregon. He's a guy with some draft hype. He kind of saw the success TJD had, and he kind of wants to be the successor as well. So you've got that front court monster with Reneau and Khalil Ware. And then the best freshman, I believe, by recruiting rankings coming into the conference is Mackenzie Mbako, who should jump in as a starter immediately. Indiana is kind of asserting themselves as the NBA bridge of the Big Ten, like the best pro team. And I mean, Michigan had guys last year, and Michigan's had guys in the past, but I kind of feel like Woodson and Indiana are kind of assuming that number 1 spot as far as NBA talent goes.
Yeah, I think, like you said, I think Mike Woodson, I have trust in him, if for no other reason except for he's I'm pretty sure, only coach in the Big Ten that still wears a suit and tie to his game, as God intended. So if maybe more people took the job as seriously as he did, the Big Ten would have better success in March.
It's an NBA coach is what that is. Former NBA coach, Mike Woodson.
It's just doing things how they're meant to be done. He's doing them the
True.
right way. And you play how you look, or you play how you feel, whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
And he's always ready to go, always the most professional. So I think Indiana is going to finish midway up the top half of the conference and have limited success in March, but I think that's probably to be expected with kind of how the team is shaking up from compared to last year. But by no means will it be a bad season. It might be a down season compared to what they're expecting, but I don't think it'll be a bad season by any means.
I'm worried about depth because like that starting five has a lot of potential, but their bench pieces don't jump off the page at you at all. And so they might be the team with an iron five this year. Sixth projected by the Big Ten coaches. I could see this team being a team that's good enough to get a double bye, though. Again, that the middle of the conference is so jam-packed. That's kind of tough. But I could see them being a fourth place team. I could see them being an eighth or ninth place team as well. But like I said, I have trust in Woodson. This team has a lot of the best, like high-end Big Ten talent. And yeah, I think this team's probably another 5, 6, 7 seed maybe when it comes to March. This is a team that could win the Big Ten tournament, I think. I think this is a team that could make a Sweet 16. This is also a team that could get bounced in the first round of both. So
the Big Ten is once again a logjam between spot 4 and 10.
Yeah.
And it will probably be a 2-game separation between those two spots. So it's how can you get the ball to roll your way in 2 games is going to decide whether you get a single bye, double bye, or no bye at all.
Yeah, the Big Ten is so deep once again. Hopefully we get to see like a good competitive depth rather than like a war of attrition depth where it's like this team doesn't suck the least or doesn't suck the most and by default goes 12-8 in conference and finishes as the second best team.
Would you by chance be referencing last year's Big Ten conference?
I don't want to say it, but yeah, I think so. Yeah. So hopefully we get a little more exciting Big Ten play. There's still like we didn't talk about Northwestern, who's returning 4 of their starters from a team that finished tied for second last year. We didn't mention Iowa, who's always there. Rutgers is always in the mix. This is going to be a big year for Nebraska ball. Who else am I forgetting? There's another team that's right. Oh, Ohio State may take a leap. Chris Holtmann, arguably on the hot seat as well. So we'll get into all those teams in the next episode that probably coming in about 2 weeks. What else am I forgetting? The bottom of the conference, Penn State, new coach,
and
Mike
Iowa,
Rhodes.
I think. I don't know if you mentioned Iowa.
I said Iowa, and then okay. Minnesota.
Yes.
The perennial doormat of my tenure of being a Big Ten observer. So yeah, that'll do it for episode 1 of the new season. I think it went pretty well. And then we relatively quick, maybe about an hour. It's not too bad.
The season is upon us. Can't wait to see what kind of craziness that always happens in the Big Ten comes out this year.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll get into the rest of the conference in the next episode. Again, we kind of glossed over some things for those last teams because we wanted to place an emphasis on Illinois and Michigan. We know where our fan base is for this podcast, and we know what they care about. So next episode, coming out in about 2 weeks, will be the rest of the teams highlighted, and then we'll break down. I guess we won't break down. We'll predict, I guess, some of the first week action of the Big Ten because we'll be right there. 2 weeks, the season's starting, so that's exciting. Yeah. So yeah, just gonna once again plug all the socials and whatnot. Link in the description for our link tree, which will bring you to our whatever you're listening to, the other 2 platforms on YouTube, on Apple, on Spotify. I know that a lot of you guys watch on YouTube. Apple and Spotify are great as well. I would encourage you to try those out if you don't want to watch, if you just want to like drive and listen. That's obviously the best option. And then, like we said earlier, make sure to give us a follow on the Twitter at B1G Watchdog News and on TikTok at B1G Watchdog News. Make sure to give this video a like and a subscribe, and we'll be back in a couple weeks for more Big Ten preview. See you guys in the next one.